My parents demanded $139,000 for their business. When I said no, Dad accidentally dropped my laptop in a koi pond. NMY name is Claire Anderson, 34 years old, and I'm a freelance wedding and commercial photographer based in Denver, Colorado. I've built my entire career from absolutely nothing. No family loans, no trust fund, no safety net of any kind. Every camera, every lens, every piece of equipment I own came from my own hard work, my own late nights editing until my eyes burned, my own hustle to land clients and deliver exceptional results. NMY parents, Richard and Patricia Anderson, have always watched my success with a mixture of pride and entitlement. They love telling their friends about their daughter, the photographer, love showing off my published work in magazines and on wedding blogs. But what they love even more is expecting me to fund their endless stream of failing business ventures with the money I've worked so hard to earn. At my father's 60th birthday party last month, an elaborate affair at their country club in suburban Denver that probably cost more than I make in 3 months, they cornered me in a quiet hallway away from the other guests. Dad's face was serious, his voice heavy with manufactured concern and barely disguised demand. "Claire, your mother and I need to talk to you about something important," he began, glancing at Mom, who nodded encouragingly. "We have an incredible business opportunity, a franchise opportunity that's basically guaranteed to succeed. But we need capital to get started. We need $139,000. And I felt my stomach drop. $139,000, more than I'd make in an entire year, even with my busiest seasons. Money that represented security, equipment upgrades I desperately needed, the down payment I'd been saving for my first condo. "We know you've been doing well with your photography business," Mom added, her tone suggesting my success was somehow their doing rather than my own effort. "This is a family investment. When our business takes off, you'll be part of the profits." I looked between them. Dad's expectant expression, Mom's calculating eyes, and felt something click into place with absolute clarity. "No," I said firmly, my voice sharp and clear despite my racing heart. "Absolutely not." NMY father's face hardened immediately, his jaw clenching in that particular way it did when he didn't get what he wanted. My mother's lips curled into a strange, smug smile that set every nerve in my body on edge, like she'd been expecting this response and had already planned her next move. "Think very carefully about this decision, Claire," Dad said, his voice dropping to something cold and threatening. "Family is supposed to support each other. We've done so much for you over the years." "I am thinking carefully," I replied, my resolve hardening with every word. "And my answer is no." I walked away from them, rejoining the party with my hands shaking slightly from adrenaline, but my decision unshakable. An hour later, I was showing some of my recent wedding portfolio to Dad's business partner, when I noticed my father standing suspiciously close to my work bag. My heart jumped. My laptop was in that bag, my $4,500 MacBook Pro, loaded with an entire wedding campaign I was editing for my biggest client of the year. 3 days of shooting, hundreds of edited photos, a $12,000 contract that could lead to referrals worth 10 times that amount. Before I could react or move toward him, I watched in horror as Dad reached into my bag, pulled out my laptop with deliberate slowness, and held it over the decorative koi pond that was the centerpiece of the country club's outdoor patio. "Oh no," he said with a smirk, his eyes locked on mine across the patio. "How clumsy of me." NHE let it drop. I watched my laptop, my livelihood, my work, my career, plunge into the water with a sickening splash. The expensive machine sank immediately, the screen going black as water flooded every circuit and component. "It's just an accident," Dad said loudly, his voice carrying across the patio, his tone dripping with false concern and barely concealed satisfaction. "These things happen. So sorry, sweetheart." "Just an accident," Mom echoed, her voice syrupy with fake sympathy, her eyes cold and calculating. "Don't make a scene, dear. It's your father's birthday." NTHE party continued buzzing around us, most people not even noticing what had just happened. My chest tightened painfully, my breath coming shallow, but I didn't scream or cry or beg or make the scene they clearly expected. I stared at that drowned laptop sitting at the bottom of the koi pond, watching the fish swim around it curiously, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. Not rage. Rage would have been too hot, too reactive. This was something colder, sharper, more focused. More focused. A plan began forming with crystal clarity. They thought they could destroy what I'd built, punish me for refusing to fund their schemes, and walk away without consequences. They were catastrophically, devastatingly wrong. NTHAT night back in my apartment, I didn't cry or call friends for comfort. Instead, I opened my cloud backup system and began methodically plotting my response. They'd soon learn that every accident comes with a price, and this one would cost them more than they could possibly imagine. NDO, you believe family could really go this far? Have you ever had relatives try to exploit or punish you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know what you would do in my situation.
The morning after, assessing the damage. NTHE, morning after my father's birthday party, I woke early with a familiar knot of anxiety in my chest. That drowned laptop represented more than just $4.500 in hardware. It was my entire professional lifeline, and I'd retrieved it from the koi pond before leaving the party, fishing it out while my parents watched with barely concealed amusement. Now it sat on my kitchen counter, water still dripping from the keyboard, looking like a crime scene exhibit. And I plugged it into my charger with hands that refused to stay completely steady, held my breath and pressed the power button. Nothing. No startup sound, no screen flicker, no Apple logo. Just dead silence. NTHE screen stayed completely black. No hum of hard drive activity, no light from the keyboard. Water had destroyed it utterly and completely. NMY hands started shaking. Not from fear or sadness, but from cold certainty washing over me. My father hadn't just dropped that laptop. He'd wanted it gone, wanted my work destroyed, wanted to punish me for refusing to fund his latest doomed business venture. And I grabbed my phone and opened my banking app, my fingers moving with purpose now rather than shock. Years ago, back when I'd first started making decent money from photography, my parents had convinced me to set up a joint account for family emergencies. They'd deposited a token $100 initially, but over time I'd added thousands from my shoots, thinking it was savings I might need access to quickly. NMY money. Every single dollar earned through my own camera, my own skill, my own endless hours of work. Not theirs. NBUT, they'd dipped into it before. $2,000 last year for unexpected car repairs. $1,500 the year before for emergency home improvements. Always with elaborate excuses and promises to pay me back that never materialized. NNOT anymore. With a few deliberate taps on my phone, I froze their access to the account entirely. Every authorization they had, every ability to withdraw or transfer, gone. My pulse stayed steady as I watched the changes process. This was just the beginning. Then I logged into our shared cloud storage service, the one where I'd been automatically backing up all my photography projects. They'd been using it too, storing their own files, leeching off my paid subscription, accessing my organizational systems. And I systematically revoked every permission they had, changed every password, locked them out completely and permanently. If they thought they could destroy my career and still benefit from my resources, they were in for a very rude awakening. NBY noon, I felt marginally more in control, despite the destroyed laptop. At least my client work was safe in my backups. I'd have to re-edit everything from scratch on a borrowed computer, which would cost me countless hours I didn't have to spare, but the raw files existed. And then my phone pinged with a text from Michelle Carter, an old colleague from the photography studio where I'd worked years ago before going freelance. We'd stayed in touch, occasionally referring clients to each other. Claire, I just got the weirdest email from your dad. Her message read, he's telling people you're his business partner for some new franchise venture. Is that true? NMY stomach dropped like I'd been pushed off a cliff. I called Michelle immediately, my voice controlled despite the rage building in my chest. What exactly did the email say? I asked. In Michelle's voice was cautious, like she already suspected something was wrong. He sent it to a bunch of local business owners and investors. I'm on the list because of my studio. He's pitching this franchise opportunity and claiming you're the creative director, that your photography reputation is backing the whole thing. He even said you'd invested $100,000 of your own money already, and I closed my eyes, processing this new level of betrayal. My father wasn't just sabotaging my work. He was stealing my name, my professional reputation I'd spent years building, to scam investors into his ridiculous scheme. Michelle, I need you to forward me every email he sent. Every single one. He's lying. I'm not involved in any way. I thought so, she said grimly. The whole thing felt off. I'll send everything over right now. And after I hung up, my phone buzzed again. The family group chat, the one I'd been ignoring since the party. NMY Aunt Karen had typed, Claire, You're being incredibly selfish. Your parents worked hard to raise you, and now they need support for their business. The least you could do is help them. NMY cousin David added, "It was just an accident with the laptop. Why are you blowing this out of proportion and making drama?" Their words hit like slaps, not because they hurt, but because of their willful blindness. My parents had deliberately destroyed my property and were now using my name to commit fraud, and my family was eating up their victim narrative without question. And I could picture my father's calculated smirk, my mother's fake sympathy, and felt my resolve crystallize into something unbreakable. They weren't sorry. They weren't victims. They were playing me, manipulating me, and weaponizing my own family against me. I didn't reply to the group chat. Instead, I opened my backup drive, thanking past me for being paranoid about always having multiple copies of everything. The wedding campaign was completely safe. Every raw file, every edit, every version saved in triplicate. MBUT, the laptop's destruction still meant days of extra work to reconstruct my editing workflow and timeline. My deadline for delivering the final wedding album was brutal, and losing this time could seriously damage my reputation with a client who could refer me to dozens of wealthy friends planning their own weddings. I leaned back against my couch, staring at my apartment ceiling, my mind already several steps ahead. My parents hadn't just made a mistake or had a moment of anger. This was calculated, strategic destruction designed to break me professionally and force me into compliance. And now they were using my professional identity to lure investors into their scheme. And I started drafting an email to my wedding client, explaining a technical issue had caused delays without mentioning family drama. My fingers paused over the keyboard, itching to fire off an angry message to my father, but I held back. Confronting him now would tip my hand, would let him know I was onto his investor fraud. I needed evidence first. Hard, undeniable proof of exactly what he was doing and how he was using my name. Michelle's email was a start, but I needed more. I opened my laptop backup logs on my phone, checking for any files my parents might have accessed before I locked them out. Nothing suspicious yet, but I wasn't done investigating. They'd underestimated me completely. They thought destroying my laptop and stealing my reputation would force me to fold, to give them what they wanted out of desperation or fear. And instead, they'd just given me every reason I needed to destroy them right back, methodically, legally, and completely.
Morning light filtered through Natalie's apartment windows, and she woke with gritty eyes and absolute clarity of purpose. She'd slept for maybe 90 minutes, but adrenaline carried her through the fog as she sat at her kitchen table with coffee and her laptop, planning her next moves. And first, equipment. She needed to fulfill her existing contracts, which meant getting her hands on a camera body and lens immediately. She opened her contacts and called Tom Morrison, a fellow architectural photographer who'd mentored her when she was starting out. "Tom, it's Natalie. I need a favor." "Nat, haven't heard from you in a while. What's up? Any chance you have backup equipment I could rent for a couple weeks? My camera got damaged, insurance is being slow, and I've got deadlines." NTOM didn't hesitate. "Come by the studio this morning. I've got my old R5 body and a couple lenses you can borrow. No charge. You've sent enough clients my way." Relief flooded through her. "Tom, you're a lifesaver. I'll be there in an hour. Bring coffee and we'll call it even." One crisis managed. Natalie showered, dressed, and was at Tom's studio in Lower Queen Anne by 9 a.m., 2 large coffees in hand. Tom Morrison was in his 50s, with a graying beard and the relaxed competence of someone who'd been photographing Seattle buildings for 30 years. His studio was everything Natalie aspired to: high ceilings, natural light, walls covered with stunning shots of the city's architectural evolution. "So, what happened to your camera?" Tom asked as he pulled a Pelican case from his equipment locker. Natalie had practiced her answer. "Family incident." Long story. Tom's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "Family incident that destroyed $6,000 worth of equipment? Nat, are you okay?" "I will be." She met his eyes. "I'm handling it." NHE studied her for a moment, then nodded. "If you need anything else, not just gear but actual help, you call me." "Understood." "Understood. Thank you, Tom." NSHE left his studio with borrowed equipment and a renewed sense of purpose. Next stop, Jessica Moreno's office in downtown Seattle. Jessica Moreno operated out of a small firm that specialized in business disputes and fraud cases. Lila had described her as scary smart and absolutely ruthless when she needs to be, which sounded exactly like what Natalie required. NTHE lawyer's office was sleek but not ostentatious. Glass and steel, with a view of Elliott Bay. Jessica herself was in her early 40s, with sharp features and an intensity that made Natalie think of a bird of prey. Ms. Chen, Lila speaks highly of you. Jessica's handshake was firm. She also said you have an urgent situation involving family and fraud? That's putting it mildly. Natalie settled into the chair across from Jessica's desk and pulled out her laptop. Can I show you what I've compiled? NFOR the next hour. Natalie walked Jessica through everything. The demand for money, the destroyed camera, the joint account withdrawals, and, most damningly, the evidence of her father using her name and reputation to solicit investors. Jessica's expression grew progressively grimmer as she reviewed the screenshots and emails. This is clear-cut fraud, she said finally. Your father is making material misrepresentations to potential investors about your involvement in his project. That's illegal, and if any of these investors rely on those statements to make financial decisions, it could be prosecuted as wire fraud or securities fraud. And what can I do about it? And several things. First, we send cease and desist letters to your father and any investors we can identify, making it clear you have no connection to this project. Second, we consider filing a formal complaint with the Washington State Department of Financial Institutions. Third, Jessica leaned forward. How far do you want to take this? Because based on what you've shown me, we could pursue civil damages for identity theft, tortious interference with your business relationships, and potentially get a restraining order preventing him from using your name. Natalie thought about her camera sinking into the koi pond, about the satisfaction on her father's face. I want to take it as far as necessary to stop him permanently. Good. Jessica's smile was sharp. Then let's build an airtight case. I'll need you to document everything. Every conversation with your parents from here on out, every social media post they make, every investor contact you become aware of. We're going to create a paper trail so comprehensive that your father won't be able to claim ignorance or mistake. They spent another hour going through strategy. Jessica would draft cease and desist letters immediately, to be sent to Raymond Chen and to the 3 investors Natalie could identify from forwarded emails. She'd also file a formal complaint with state regulators, which would trigger an investigation into her father's business practices. And this is going to be expensive, Jessica warned as they concluded. Legal fees add up fast. My retainer is $5,000, and depending on how your father responds, this could run $10,000 to $20,000 before we're done. Natalie thought of her savings account, now down to $176,000 after equipment expenses. I can afford it. This isn't about money. It's about protecting what I've built. Good attitude. Most people get cold feet when they realize the cost of fighting family. Jessica stood, extending her hand again. I'll have draft letters to you by tomorrow for review. In the meantime, no contact with your parents whatsoever. If they call, text, email, anything, you don't respond. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Natalie left Jessica's office feeling lighter than she had in 24 hours. She had a plan. She had an expert in her corner. And she had documentation that would make her father's lies impossible to sustain. NTHE rest of the week passed in a blur of activity. Natalie threw herself into her photography work, shooting a corporate headquarters in Bellevue and a boutique hotel renovation in Fremont. The borrowed camera felt different in her hands, slightly lighter, the grip worn in someone else's pattern, but she made it work. She always made it work. And between shoots, she monitored her parents' social media obsessively. Her father posted twice more about the Kirkland project, each time with vague references to family partnerships and collaborative vision. Her mother shared one of his posts with the caption, "So proud of what my husband is building." Natalie screenshot everything, adding to her evidence folder. On Wednesday, Jessica emailed the draft cease and desist letters. Natalie read them with satisfaction. They were formal, coldly professional, and absolutely devastating in their clarity. The letter to her father opened with, "You are hereby directed to immediately cease all use of Natalie Chen's name, likeness, and professional reputation in connection with your business ventures. Your unauthorized and fraudulent representations constitute identity theft and fraud. Night went on for 3 pages, citing specific examples with dates and screenshots, and concluded with a threat of legal action if he didn't comply immediately and notify all investors of the misrepresentation. Perfect. Natalie emailed back. Send them. NTHE letters went out Thursday morning via certified mail and email. Natalie was in her apartment editing photos when her phone exploded with notifications. And first, a text from her father. What the hell is this legal threat? Call me NN on. Then her mother. Natalie, how dare you involve lawyers in family business? This is unconscionable. Then Marcus, her brother. Mom and Dad are freaking out. What's going on? Natalie ignored all of them, following Jessica's instructions. Let them panic. Let them realize she wasn't playing games. More texts followed throughout the day, each one more desperate or angry than the last. Her father's messages veered between rage, "You're going to regret this," and attempted manipulation. "We're your parents. We only wanted what's best." Her mother tried guilt. "After everything we've done for you," and then threats. "You're tearing this family apart." Natalie forwarded every message to Jessica, who responded with one word: perfect. NBY Friday, the family group chat had exploded. Aunts and uncles weighed in, most of them taking her parents' side without knowing the full story. Her cousin Jennifer wrote, "Natalie, lawyers? Really? This is so unnecessary." Nuncle Paul, her father's brother, was more direct. "You're being selfish and vindictive. Your father made a simple mistake and you're destroying him." Only Marcus seemed uncertain, his messages to Natalie more questioning than accusatory. "Did Dad really use your name without permission? Mom says you're lying." Natalie responded only to Marcus. "Check his LinkedIn. Check his Facebook posts in the Seattle Investors Group. Everything's public. Then decide who's lying." NSHE heard nothing back for 2 hours. Then, "Holy shit, I had no idea. Nat, I'm sorry. NTHAT evening," Lila called. "You're not going to believe this. Words getting around about your dad's project. I heard from 2 people today, asking if you were really involved in that Kirkland development. What did you tell them? The truth. That you're not involved, never have been, and anyone claiming otherwise is lying. Nat, this is spreading through the architecture and photography networks. Your dad's reputation is starting to take a hit." Good, Natalie thought viciously. Let it spread. Let everyone know what kind of man Raymond Shen really was. The following Monday brought the first sign that Natalie's counterattack was having an effect. Jessica called in the morning with an update. "I heard from one of the investors your father contacted, Michael Brennan, runs a real estate development fund. He received our cease and desist letter and called me directly. Said he was grateful for the heads up because he'd been considering a 6-figure investment in your father's project specifically because of your involvement. Did he say anything else? That he's pulling out completely and warning other investors in his network. Apparently your father had a meeting scheduled with Brennan's fund this week. That's been canceled." Natalie felt a fierce satisfaction. "So the project is losing funding?" "Looks that way. I've also heard from the Washington State Department of Financial Institutions. They're opening an investigation into your father's investor solicitations. They take securities fraud very seriously." After the call ended, Natalie allowed herself a moment of pure triumph. Her father had thought he could use her name as leverage, as social proof to lure investors. Instead, she'd turned his greatest asset into his biggest liability. NBUT, she didn't have long to savor the victory. That afternoon, her Aunt Virginia, her mother's older sister, showed up at Natalie's apartment unannounced. Natalie opened the door to find Virginia standing in the hallway, her face tight with disapproval. Virginia Hartley had always been the family matriarch, the enforcer of propriety and traditional values. She'd never approved of Natalie's career choice, viewing photography as frivolous compared to Marcus's business path. "And we need to talk," Virginia said, pushing past Natalie into the apartment. "And hello to you too, Aunt Virginia." Natalie closed the door, already steeling herself for confrontation. Virginia surveyed the apartment with thinly disguised disdain, the secondhand furniture, the walls covered with Natalie's photographs, the equipment cases stacked in the corner. "Your mother is devastated. Your father is facing financial ruin. And you're sitting here in your little apartment, playing with cameras, while your family falls apart." "And playing with cameras?" Natalie's voice went cold. This, playing, pays my bills and built a savings account that Dad wanted to raid for his failing business project. It's not failing. Or it wasn't until you poisoned potential investors against it. Jessica moved with impressive speed. By Monday afternoon, she'd filed for a temporary restraining order against both of Natalie's parents, citing the destruction of property, harassment, defamation, and attempted business interference. The filing included Tom Morrison's sworn statement, the audio recording of Diane's hallway tirade, copies of Raymond's threatening texts, and a comprehensive timeline of events. NTHE restraining order hearing was scheduled for Thursday, emergency status, due to the ongoing nature of the harassment. Meanwhile, Natalie's professional life was exploding in the best possible way. The crisis with her parents had forced her to be more visible, more connected, more proactive about protecting her reputation. She'd reached out to every client and colleague, explaining in professional terms that false statements were being made about her work and that she wanted to set the record straight. NTHE response had been overwhelmingly supportive. 3 of her biggest clients sent her additional contracts explicitly stating their satisfaction with her work. 2 architecture firms that had never hired her before reached out, saying they'd heard about the situation and wanted to show their support by bringing her onto their preferred vendor lists. Most surprisingly, Seattle Magazine contacted her about a feature article on her work. The editor, Sharon Wells, was blunt about the angle. Everyone's talking about the photographer whose parents tried to sabotage her career. That's a compelling human interest story, and your work is legitimately excellent. We want to do a 6-page spread. Natalie hesitated. Part of her wanted to keep this private, to handle it quietly, without airing family drama in public. But another part, the part that was tired of being quiet, tired of protecting people who didn't protect her, saw the opportunity. Can I have editorial input on how the family situation is presented? Absolutely. We're not a tabloid. This is about your photography first, with the human interest story as context. You'd have full approval on quotes and framing. Then I'm in. NTHE Magazine scheduled a shoot and interview for the following week. They also wanted to photograph some of her recent projects and talk to her clients. It was the kind of exposure that typically took years to achieve, and it was coming directly because of her willingness to fight back against her parents. Sabotage NTHE restraining order hearing arrived with surprising speed. Natalie met Jessica at the King County Courthouse at 8 a.m., her stomach churning with nerves despite Jessica's reassurances. District Court Family Law Division, Jessica explained as they went through security. Judge Sandra Martinez is hearing this. She's fair, no nonsense, and she doesn't like harassment cases. NTHE courtroom was small, with blonde wood paneling and fluorescent lights that hummed faintly. Natalie's parents were already there with their lawyer, a man in his 60s named Robert Kensington, who had the weary look of someone who'd been hired for an impossible task. This was the first time Natalie had seen her parents since the birthday party. Her father looked haggard, with shadows under his eyes and a tightness around his mouth that suggested stress. Her mother sat rigid beside him, radiating fury. When their eyes met across the courtroom, Diane's expression was pure venom. Natalie held her gaze for a moment, then deliberately looked away. She wasn't going to be intimidated. And Judge Martinez entered, and everyone stood. She was a woman in her 50s, with iron gray hair pulled back severely, and when she sat, her gaze swept the room with analytical precision. This is a hearing on Ms. Chen's petition for a temporary restraining order against Raymond and Diane Chen. Ms. Moreno, you're representing the petitioner? Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Kensington for the respondents. Let's hear from the petitioner first. Ms. Moreno? Jessica stood, commanding the room with easy confidence. Your Honor, Ms. Natalie Chen is a successful architectural photographer who has been subjected to a pattern of harassment and sabotage by her parents after she refused to invest in their failing business venture. NSHE laid out the case methodically. The destroyed camera, the fraudulent use of Natalie's name to solicit investors, the threatening texts, the hallway confrontation, and finally, Raymond's attempt to pay Tom Morrison to spread lies about Natalie's work. We're not alleging a momentary lapse in judgment, Jessica concluded. This is a sustained campaign to punish Ms. Chen for exercising her right to control her own finances and reputation. The evidence shows clear intent to harm her both personally and professionally. Judge Martinez looked at Raymond Chen. Mr. Kensington, your response? Robert Kensington stood slowly, and Natalie could tell from his body language that he didn't want to be here. Your Honor, the Chens acknowledge that family tensions have escalated, but they contest the characterization of their actions as harassment. The incident with the camera was a regrettable accident. Your Honor? Jessica interrupted. We have a text message from Mr. Chen stating explicitly that he dropped her camera deliberately. It's in the filing. Judge Martinez flipped through the documents. I see it. Mr. Kensington, are you contesting the authenticity of this text? No, Your Honor. But then it wasn't an accident. Continue. Kensington looked increasingly uncomfortable. The business situation is a misunderstanding. Mr. Chin believed his daughter had agreed to participate in the project based on earlier conversations. We have statements from Ms. Chen's colleague that she was actively denying involvement and attempting to correct false statements Mr. Chen made to investors. Jessica interjected. There was no misunderstanding. There was fraud. Judge Martinez raised a hand. Ms. Moreno, I'll hear your arguments when it's your turn. Mr. Kensington, Your Honor, the Chens are willing to cease all mention of their daughter in business contexts and to respect her boundaries going forward. They request that this matter be resolved without a restraining order, which would be unnecessarily punitive for what amounts to a family dispute. A family dispute that includes destruction of property, identity theft, defamation, and harassment, Jessica said sharply when it was her turn. Your Honor, Ms. Chen has repeatedly asked her parents to stop contacting her, to stop using her name, and to cease their harassment. They've escalated instead. A restraining order is necessary to protect her safety and her business. Judge Martinez studied the documents for a long moment, then looked directly at Raymond and Diane Chen. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, I'm going to be very clear with you. Based on the evidence presented today, your actions toward your daughter constitute harassment under Washington law. The destruction of her camera was deliberate and malicious. The misuse of her professional reputation was fraudulent. The continued contact after she asked you to stop is stalking behavior. Diane started to stand, but Kensington pulled her back down. I'm granting the temporary restraining order. Judge Martinez continued. You are both prohibited from contacting Ms. Chen directly or indirectly, from approaching within 500 feet of her residence or workplace, and from making any statements about her to third parties. This order is in effect for 1 year, at which point Ms. Chen may petition for renewal if necessary. NSHE looked at Natalie. Ms. Chen, if your parents violate this order, call the police immediately. Violation of a restraining order is a criminal offense. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. As they left the courtroom, Natalie heard her mother's voice rising behind her. This is insane. She's our daughter. We have rights. You have the rights I just outlined. Judge Martinez said coldly, I suggest you respect them. Now outside the courthouse, Jessica was practically glowing. That was about as decisive as these hearings get. Martinez didn't leave any room for ambiguity. What happens now? Now we wait and see if they respect the order. I'm guessing they will. Your father can't afford more legal trouble with the state investigation ongoing. But stay vigilant. Document anything suspicious. When the offer came in, Natalie had sat in her apartment for an hour, just staring at the number. It was more than she'd asked her father for. It was more than she would have invested in his doomed project. It was validation that she'd made the right choice, that protecting her career had been worth every uncomfortable moment, every family relationship strained or broken, every night lying awake wondering if she was doing the right thing. She'd signed the contract the same day. Have you heard anything from your parents? Alex asked one afternoon while they were editing photos in Natalie's apartment-turned-temporary office. Natalie glanced up from her screen. Not directly. The restraining order is still active, but Marcus tells me my mom keeps asking him to pass along messages. What kind of messages? Guilt, mostly. Tell your sister, I'm living in a tiny apartment now. Tell your sister her father is in prison because of her. That sort of thing. Natalie shrugged. I don't engage. Marcus knows better than to actually relay them. Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them? It was a question Natalie had asked herself repeatedly. I don't know. Part of me thinks maybe, eventually, if they genuinely acknowledged what they did and apologized. But honestly, I don't miss them. My life is better without them in it. I'm happier, more successful, less stressed. Why would I voluntarily add back people who made me feel small and inadequate? And Alex nodded slowly. That makes sense. I think people have this idea. that family is sacred, that you have to maintain those relationships no matter what. But that's not always healthy. No, it's not. And I spent too many years trying to be the daughter they wanted instead of the person I actually am. NTHE New Studio opened in April with a small celebration. Natalie, Alex, Tom, Lila, Marcus, and a handful of clients and colleagues. They drank wine, admired the space, and talked about future projects. Natalie gave an impromptu speech, thanking everyone for their support. "A year ago, I was in a very different place," she said, standing in the middle of her new studio with a glass of wine in hand. "Some of you know what I went through. Family situation, legal battles, a lot of uncertainty. And I want to say thank you for standing by me, for believing in my work, and for helping me build this." NSHE gestured around the studio. "This space represents something bigger than just a place to edit photos. It represents autonomy. It represents refusing to let anyone else define my worth or my future. It represents the idea that sometimes the most important thing you can do is protect what you've built, even when that means making hard choices." There was applause, and Tom raised his glass. "To Natalie, who turned sabotage into success." "To Natalie," the room echoed. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and she was alone in the studio, Natalie sat at her new desk and opened her journal. She'd been documenting this entire journey, and she wanted to capture this moment. "Today I opened my studio," she wrote, "the space I've dreamed about for 7 years. I did it without my parents' money, without their approval, without any connection to them at all. And it feels right. It feels like mine in a way nothing else ever has. People keep asking if I regret how things played out with my family. The answer is no. I regret that my parents chose to exploit me, to sabotage me, to try to destroy what I'd built. But I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret protecting myself. I don't regret any of the legal actions or boundaries I set. My father is in prison for fraud. My mother lost everything and had to move in with relatives. My extended family is fractured, with some people still defending my parents and others seeing them clearly for what they are. And I'm here, in my studio, with a thriving business and a future that looks bright. I didn't cause their downfall. They did that themselves through years of questionable business practices, and then trying to use me as their escape route. I just refused to go down with them. If I could go back to that birthday party and give myself one piece of advice, it would be this: trust your instincts. When you feel like you're being exploited, you probably are. When you feel like your boundaries are being violated, they probably are. And you don't owe anyone, not even family, access to your life, your money, or your reputation if they're going to abuse it. I'm building something now that's entirely my own. And it's better than anything I could have imagined." Natalie felt like she could breathe fully for the first time in weeks. A restraining order, legal protection, boundaries with teeth. NSHE went back to her apartment and worked on her photography with a lightness she hadn't felt since before the birthday party. She edited the corporate headquarters shots, fine-tuned the hotel renovation photos, and started planning a personal project, a series on Seattle's architectural evolution, focusing on how old and new styles coexisted in the city. NTHAT evening, Marcus called. "I heard about the restraining order. Mom's losing her mind." "I imagine she is. Nat, I need you to know that I think you did the right thing. I've been going through Dad's business records. He made me a partner last year, so I have access. And it's bad. Really bad. The Kirkland project was never properly funded. He was using deposits from new investors to pay returns to old investors. It's literally a Ponzi scheme." Natalie's chest tightened. "Marcus, you need to protect yourself. If the state investigation uncovers that..." "I know. I've already contacted a lawyer. I'm cooperating with investigators and documenting that I had no knowledge of the fraud. But Nat, Dad's going to jail, there's no way around it. And Mom's gonna lose everything because they've commingled all their assets. Ian, I didn't want..." Natalie started, then stopped. That wasn't true. She had wanted consequences. She'd wanted them to face the results of their actions. "I wanted them to stop. I wanted them to leave me alone and stop using my name. Whatever happens now is because of what they did, not because of what I did. I know, and for what it's worth, I'm proud of you for standing up to them. I should have done it years ago." And after Marcus hung up, Natalie sat in silence, processing the information. Her father was facing criminal charges. Her parents were going to lose everything, and she'd been the catalyst. NSHE waited for guilt to arrive, for some sense that she'd gone too far, but it didn't come. Instead, she felt a strange sense of peace, as if a weight she'd been carrying for 29 years had finally lifted. They'd made their choices. She'd made hers. And she was going to live with the consequences of her choice, with her head held high. The Seattle Magazine feature ran in the first week of November, and it was everything Natalie could have hoped for. The 6-page spread showcased her best architectural work: the downtown high-rise at Golden Hour, the renovation of Pike Place Market's historic corners, the stunning glass and steel library edition that had won an AIA award, NBUT. It was the sidebar story that really resonated. Sharon Wells had interviewed Natalie about her career trajectory, her artistic process, and yes, the family situation. The article was tasteful, focusing primarily on how Natalie had responded to attempted sabotage by doubling down on her professionalism and building her network. When someone tries to destroy your reputation, Natalie was quoted as saying, "The best response is to make your work so undeniably excellent that lies can't stick. My parents tried to claim I was unreliable and unprofessional. My response was to deliver exceptional work on every single project and let my clients speak for me." NTHE piece included testimonials from 3 major clients, each praising Natalie's skill, reliability, and creative vision. Tom Morrison provided a quote about her technical expertise. Even one of the architecture firms she'd never worked with chimed in, saying they'd recently hired her specifically because of how she'd handled a difficult situation with grace. NTHE article mentioned the restraining order, but framed it as Natalie protecting herself from harassment, not as family drama. It was exactly the narrative she'd wanted, not a victim story, but a story about a professional woman setting boundaries and refusing to be intimidated. NTHE response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 48 hours of publication, Natalie received 17 new client inquiries. Her Instagram following tripled. A commercial real estate developer in San Francisco reached out about documenting their entire portfolio. Most significantly, the Seattle Times contacted her about becoming their regular architectural photographer for the Sunday real estate section. That magazine piece was incredibly smart, Lila said over coffee that weekend. You turned a nightmare situation into a professional win. People respect someone who fights back gracefully. Natalie stirred her latte, thinking about the journey from her mother's birthday party to this moment. I didn't have much choice. My parents were going to destroy me one way or another, either by taking my money and tanking their scam project with my name attached, or by spreading lies about my work. I had to go on a fence. Still, a lot of people would have caved to family pressure, especially with your whole extended family initially taking their side. Most of them have come around. Marcus has been great. Even Aunt Virginia stopped defending them once she saw the evidence. Natalie paused. Though I think the state investigation helped with that. Hard to claim your brother is innocent when the Department of Financial Institutions publishes findings of securities fraud. NTHE state investigation had concluded in late October, and the results were damning. Raymond Chen had solicited investments under false pretenses, made material misrepresentations about project funding, and operated what investigators classified as a Ponzi-style scheme. He was facing criminal charges that could result in prison time, and the state had frozen his remaining assets pending restitution to defrauded investors. Diane Chen, while not criminally charged, was facing civil lawsuits from multiple investors. The legal theory was that as Raymond's spouse and business partner, she'd benefited from the fraud and should be liable for damages. Their house in Bellevue was already listed for sale, forced by creditor claims. Natalie knew all this because Marcus kept her updated, acting as a buffer between her and the family chaos. He'd fully extracted himself from his father's business, cooperating with investigators, and establishing his own separate corporate entity. He'd also privately apologized to Natalie multiple times for not believing her initially. Have your parents tried to contact you? Lila asked. They can't. The restraining order is still active for another 10 months, though Marcus said Mom tries to send messages through him. He doesn't pass them along. What would you do if they did reach out? If they actually apologized? Natalie considered this. I don't know. 6 months ago, I would have said maybe we could rebuild something. But now? I don't think I want them in my life at all. They didn't just hurt me once. They hurt me deliberately, repeatedly, and then tried to destroy my career when I fought back. That's not something you apologize away. Not everyone understands cutting off family. Not everyone had my family. Natalie smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. I'm building my own family now. People who support me because they want to, not because they're obligated to. You, Tom, Marcus, even Jessica. You've all been more family to me in the past 6 months than my parents ever were. NTHE San Francisco Developers Project came through in December, a 6-month contract worth $85,000 to photograph 20 properties across the Bay Area. It meant traveling back and forth, overnight stays, logistical complexity. It also meant cementing her reputation as a photographer worth hiring for major projects. Natalie said yes without hesitation. NSHE was on a shoot in San Francisco, photographing a converted warehouse building with massive skylights, when Marcus called with the news she'd been halfway expecting, and Dad took a plea deal. 3 years in federal prison for securities fraud. Natalie stood on the roof of the warehouse, looking out over the San Francisco skyline, her phone pressed to her ear. 3 years? He'll probably serve 18 months with good behavior. Mom avoided criminal charges, but she's filed for bankruptcy. They're losing the house, the cars, everything. She's going to live with Uncle Paul after the sale closes. How are you handling it? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I'm relieved it's over. The past 6 months have been hell, watching everything unravel, dealing with lawyers and investigators. At least now there's finality. Dad made his choices, and now he's facing consequences. I can start moving forward. Yeah. Natalie watched the late afternoon light paint the city gold. I know what you mean. And after she hung up, she stood there for a long time, processing. Her father was going to prison. Her mother had lost everything. The family she'd grown up with had effectively ceased to exist, and she felt not happy exactly, not triumphant, but at peace. She'd protected herself, stood her ground, and refused to let them drag her down. Sometimes that was all you could do. NSHE picked up her camera and went back to work, capturing the way light moved through the warehouse's industrial spaces. This was her life now: travel, creativity, professional success built on her own merit. Her parents had tried to take it from her, and she'd fought back with everything she had. She'd won. By February, Natalie's life had transformed so completely that the woman who'd attended her mother's birthday party felt like a stranger. That Natalie had been uncertain, still seeking approval she'd never receive, still tied to people who saw her only as a resource to exploit. This Natalie was different. NSHE stood in the empty space that would become her new studio, 200 square feet in a renovated industrial building in Georgetown, with exposed brick, massive windows, and enough room for a proper shooting area, editing station, and client meeting space. The lease was signed, the build-out was scheduled, and she was paying for it entirely with money she'd earned herself. "This is incredible," Tom Morrison said, surveying the space. He'd come to celebrate with her, bringing a bottle of champagne and his characteristic enthusiasm. "You've dreamed about this for how long?" "Since I started shooting professionally. 7 years." Natalie walked to the windows, looking out over the industrial landscape of Georgetown, a neighborhood that was rapidly gentrifying, filling with artists and creatives and small businesses like hers. "I was saving up, planning to wait until I had 200 grand in the bank. Then everything happened with my parents, and I realized I was waiting for some magical moment of perfect readiness that was never going to come." "So you decided to just do it?" "I decided that my life wasn't going to be controlled by fear anymore. Fear of failure, fear of not having enough money, fear of what my parents thought." She turned back to Tom. "The worst thing I could imagine happened. My parents actively tried to destroy my career. And you know what? I survived. More than survived. I thrived. So what's left to be afraid of?" NTOM popped the champagne, and they toasted to new beginnings in plastic cups because the studio didn't have glasses yet. NTHE Seattle Times contract had formalized, providing steady income and regular exposure. The San Francisco developer had extended her contract for an additional 6 months. And the Seattle Magazine feature had led to 3 corporate clients who wanted year-long contracts for all their architectural photography needs. Natalie's income had more than doubled compared to the previous year. She'd hired an assistant, a recent photography school graduate named Alex Kim, who had excellent technical skills and enough enthusiasm to power a small city. She was turning down projects now because she didn't have capacity, which was both stressful and thrilling. Most significantly, she'd received a call from a national architecture publication based in New York. They wanted her to shoot a series on Pacific Northwest architecture. 6 major projects, published over the course of a year, with her name prominently featured. It was the kind of exposure that could launch a career to the next level. NTHE contract was for $180,000. When the offer came in, Natalie had sat in her apartment for an hour, just staring at the number. It was more than she'd asked her father for. It was more than she would have invested in his doomed project, and it was validation that she'd made the right choice, that protecting her career had been worth every uncomfortable moment, every family relationship strained or broken, every night lying awake wondering if she was doing the right thing. She'd signed the contract the same day. "Have you heard anything from your parents?" Alex asked one afternoon while they were editing photos in Natalie's apartment-turned-temporary office. Natalie glanced up from her screen. "Not directly. The restraining order is still active, but Marcus tells me my mom keeps asking him to pass along messages." "What kind of messages?" "Guilt, mostly. Tell your sister I'm living in a tiny apartment now. Tell your sister her father is in prison because of her. That sort of thing." Natalie shrugged. "I don't engage. Marcus knows better than to actually relay them." "Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them?" It was a question Natalie had asked herself repeatedly. "I don't know. Part of me thinks, maybe, eventually, if they genuinely acknowledged what they did and apologized. But honestly, I don't miss them. My life is better without them in it. I'm happier, more successful, less stressed. Why would I voluntarily add back people who made me feel small and inadequate?" N.A. Lex nodded slowly. "That makes sense. I think people have this idea that family is sacred, that you have to maintain those relationships no matter what, but that's not always healthy." "No, it's not. And I spent too many years trying to be the daughter they wanted instead of the person I actually am." NTHE new studio opened in April with a small celebration. Natalie, Alex, Tom, Lila, Marcus, and a handful of clients and colleagues. They drank wine, admired the space, and talked about future projects. Natalie gave an impromptu speech, thanking everyone for their support. "A year ago, I was in a very different place," she said, standing in the middle of her new studio with a glass of wine in hand. "Some of you know what I went through. Family situation, legal battles, a lot of uncertainty. And I want to say thank you for standing by me, for believing in my work, and for helping me build this." NSHE gestured around the studio. "This space represents something bigger than just a place to edit photos. It represents autonomy. It represents refusing to let anyone else define my worth or my future. It represents the idea that sometimes the most important thing you can do is protect what you've built, even when that means making hard choices." There was applause, and Tom raised his glass. "To Natalie, who turned sabotage into success." "To Natalie," the room echoed. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and she was alone in the studio, Natalie sat at her new desk and opened her journal. She'd been documenting this entire journey, and she wanted to capture this moment. "Today I opened my studio," she wrote, "the space I've dreamed about for 7 years. I did it without my parents, money, without their approval, without any connection to them at all. And it feels right. It feels like mine in a way nothing else ever has. People keep asking if I regret how things played out with my family. The answer is no. I regret that my parents chose to exploit me, to sabotage me, to try to destroy what I'd built. But I don't regret fighting back. I don't regret protecting myself. I don't regret any of the legal actions or boundaries I set. My father is in prison for fraud. My mother lost everything and had to move in with relatives. My extended family is fractured, with some people still defending my parents and others seeing them clearly for what they are. And I'm here, in my studio, with a thriving business and a future that looks bright. I didn't cause their downfall. They did that themselves through years of questionable business practices and then trying to use me as their escape route. I just refused to go down with them. If I could go back to that birthday party and give myself one piece of advice, it would be this: trust your instincts. When you feel like you're being exploited, you probably are. When you feel like your boundaries are being violated, they probably are. And you don't owe anyone, not even family, access to your life, your money, or your reputation if they're going to abuse it. I'm building something now that's entirely my own, and it's better than anything I could have imagined. Summer in Seattle brought long days and golden light that made every building look like art. Natalie spent her days shooting the new waterfront development, historic renovation projects in Capitol Hill, cutting-edge sustainable architecture in South Lake Union. Her portfolio grew, her reputation solidified, and her bank account reflected the success she'd built. NTHE National Architecture Publication Series launched in June, with the first feature on a stunning Seattle Public Library expansion. The article included a full-page photo credit and a sidebar about Natalie's work. Within a week, she received inquiries from Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York, major markets where her reputation had been purely word of mouth before. "You need to think about expansion," Lila said over lunch in Georgetown, a short walk from Natalie's studio. "You're getting requests from all over the country. You could open a second location, or at least establish a network of partner photographers." Natalie twirled pasta on her fork, considering. "I don't want to grow too fast and lose quality. But you're right that I'm turning down good projects because of geography. What about hiring a second photographer here to handle the Seattle overflow, which frees you up to travel?" That could work. Natalie made a mental note to discuss it with Alex, who might have recommendations from their photography school network. NHER phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Mom asked if I'd have lunch with her and pass along a message to you. I said no, but wanted to give you a heads up in case she tries to contact you directly." Natalie's jaw tightened. The restraining order was still in effect for another 4 months, but her mother was apparently testing the boundaries. She texted back, "Thanks for the warning. If she persists, let me know and I'll document it." She'd learned to think like this: documentation, evidence, boundaries. It had become second nature, a form of self-protection that felt as essential as locking her door at night. "Family stuff?" Lila asked, noting Natalie's expression. "Mom's trying to use Marcus to contact me." He shut it down. "How much longer on the restraining order?" 4 months. "Then I can renew it for another year if I want to. Will you?" Natalie was quiet for a moment. "Probably. I don't see the point in leaving the door open." They've never apologized. Never acknowledged what they did wrong. My mom seems to think she's the victim in all this because she lost her house and her lifestyle. But she was complicit in everything my dad did, and she was right there watching him drop my camera in the pond with that satisfied smile. NTHE memory still stung, even 15 months later. But it was a distant sting now, like an old scar that only ached when the weather changed. August brought news from Marcus that their father had been released from federal prison, having served 14 months of his 3-year sentence. He'd been moved to a halfway house in Tacoma, where he'd spend the next 6 months transitioning back to civilian life, and he asked about you, Marcus said during their weekly phone call. "Asked if I thought you'd be willing to visit." "What did you tell him?" "That you had a restraining order against him, and that he needed to respect that." Marcus paused. He said some things about being sorry, about wanting to make amends. But honestly, Nat, it felt performative. Like he was saying what he thought he should say, not what he actually felt. "Yeah, that sounds about right." Natalie looked out the window of her studio at the Seattle skyline. "Did he ask about my business? About whether I was successful?" "No. He asked if you'd be willing to help Mom financially." Said she's struggling. Natalie let out a harsh laugh. "Of course he did. Even now, even after everything, he still sees me as a source of money." I told him no, obviously, but I wanted you to know. And I appreciate that. Natalie felt a wave of gratitude for her brother, who'd become her genuine ally through all of this. "Marcus, thank you for being the buffer. I know it can't be easy having them constantly trying to use you to get to me, It's fine. Honestly, the more time passes, the clearer I see what they are. Dad's not sorry he committed fraud. He's sorry he got caught. Mom's not sorry she enabled him. She's sorry she lost her comfortable life. Neither of them have ever said they're sorry for what they did to you specifically. NTHAT night. Natalie updated her journal. Dad's out of prison and already asking for money. Some things never change. But I have changed. The woman who might have felt guilty for saying no, who might have questioned whether she'd been too harsh, who might have wondered if family reconciliation was worth pursuing, she doesn't exist anymore. I know exactly who my parents are now, and I know exactly what I need to do. Nothing. No contact, no communication, no opening the door, even a crack. Because they've shown me repeatedly that they'll exploit any opening I give them. September brought an unexpected invitation. Sharon Wells from Seattle Magazine called with a proposition. We're doing a follow-up piece on that article we ran about you last year. Where Are They Now series. The response to your story was incredible. We got more letters about it than any feature we've run in 5 years. People want to know how you're doing. Natalie agreed, and the resulting article was even more impactful than the first. It showcased her new studio, highlighted her national contracts, and included her thoughts on the journey. The hardest part wasn't the legal battles or the business challenges. Natalie was quoted saying, "It was accepting that my parents were never going to be the people I needed them to be. That I was never going to get an apology or acknowledgement or the kind of parental support most people take for granted. Once I accepted that, I could move forward. I could stop waiting for them to change and focus on building the life I wanted." NTHE article mentioned that her father had served time for securities fraud and that her mother had filed for bankruptcy. It was factual, not sensational, and it put her parents' actions in clear context. Within hours of publication, Natalie's inbox flooded with messages. But these weren't client inquiries. These were personal stories from readers who'd experienced similar family betrayals, who'd struggled with setting boundaries, who'd felt alone in making the decision to cut off toxic family members. Thank you for sharing your story. One email read, "I've been struggling with whether to go no contact with my parents who are financially exploiting me. Your article gave me the courage to set boundaries." Another, "I'm a lawyer who handles family business disputes, and I see this pattern constantly. Parents who view their successful children as ATMs. Your case is a perfect example of why legal protection is sometimes necessary." Natalie read through dozens of messages, feeling a strange sense of purpose. Her story wasn't just about her anymore. It was helping other people recognize and escape similar patterns. NSHE responded to several messages, offering encouragement and, in some cases, referrals to Jessica Moreno for people who needed legal help. She'd turned her trauma into something useful, something that might prevent other people from suffering the same way she had. In October marked a full year since Raymond Chen's conviction. Natalie's restraining order was set to expire in November, and she had to decide whether to renew it. NSHE discussed it with Jessica over coffee. "What's your professional recommendation?" "Renew it," Jessica said without hesitation. "Your parents haven't changed. Your father's trying to use Marcus to request money. Your mother's making passive-aggressive comments through family members. They haven't taken accountability, and they're still treating you as a resource rather than a person. The restraining order is your legal shield. Don't give it up unless you're certain you won't need it." "I'm certain I'll need it, or at least I'm not certain I won't." Natalie stirred her latte. "Do you think they'll ever actually leave me alone?" "Not until they've exhausted every possible avenue. Right now, your success is eating at them. You're thriving while they're struggling, and people like your parents can't handle that. They need to believe that their way was right, that their actions were justified. Your success proves they were wrong, and that's intolerable to them." Natalie filed for renewal of the restraining order, and it was granted without contest. Her parents didn't even show up to the hearing. Kensington appeared on their behalf and acknowledged that his clients would comply with the extended order. Another year of legal protection. Another year of guaranteed distance. In December, Natalie received an unexpected call from Aunt Virginia. They hadn't spoken since that confrontation in Natalie's apartment more than a year earlier. "Natalie, I wanted to apologize." Virginia's voice was uncertain, lacking its usual authority. "I was wrong about your parents. I was wrong to defend them without knowing the full story. Marcus showed me the evidence and I'm ashamed I didn't believe you immediately. Natalie was quiet for a moment, processing. Thank you for saying that. It means something. Your mother called me last week asking if I'd talk to you about helping them financially. I told her absolutely not, and I told her why. Because what they did to you was unforgivable. She hung up on me. Virginia laughed bitterly. I've known my sister for 63 years, and I'm only now seeing who she really is. It's hard when people you love turn out to be different than you thought. Yes, I'm sorry I added to your burden when you were already dealing with so much. And after they hung up, Natalie felt a small piece of peace settle into place. Not everyone in her family had abandoned her. Some people, when presented with evidence, were willing to change their minds. Christmas came, and for the first time in her life, Natalie didn't attend any Chen family celebrations. She spent the holiday with Marcus and his fiancée, Lila, and her partner, Tom, and his family. They gathered at Natalie's new studio, which she decorated with lights and a tree, and they ate catered food and exchanged gifts and laughed without any undercurrent of judgment or criticism. This is what family should feel like, Marcus said quietly to Natalie as they stood by the window, looking out at the Georgetown neighborhood lit up with holiday decorations. People who actually care about each other, not people who are related by obligation. Yeah, Natalie agreed. This is exactly what it should feel like. The new year brought opportunities that would have seemed impossible 2 years earlier. A major international architecture firm hired Natalie to document their projects across 5 cities: Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Vancouver. The 18-month contract was worth $420,000, and it would establish her as one of the premier architectural photographers on the West Coast. NSHE hired 2 additional photographers to handle the Seattle overflow: Sarah Chen, no relation, and David Park, both talented professionals who could shoot to her standards. Alex became her full-time studio manager, coordinating schedules, managing client relationships, and handling the administrative work that Natalie had always struggled with. NHER business had evolved from a one-woman operation to a small firm with a team, a reputation, and recurring revenue that provided genuine security. You've built something remarkable, Tom told her during one of their regular coffee meetings. From that woman who showed up at my studio needing to borrow equipment to this, it's incredible. I had a lot of help. You, Lila, Jessica, Marcus. I couldn't have done this alone. Maybe. But you made the hard choices. You stood your ground when your whole family was telling you to back down. That takes courage most people don't have. In March, Natalie received a letter forwarded through Jessica Moreno. It was from her father, handwritten on legal pad paper. And dear Natalie, it began. I know I'm not supposed to contact you directly, so I'm sending this through your lawyer in the hope that she'll pass it along. I wanted you to know that I've been going to therapy at the halfway house, and I've been working on understanding why I made the choices I did. I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed your trust. I know I tried to use your success for my own benefit. I'm sorry for all of it. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to know that I see now what I did wrong, and if I could go back and change it, I would. I hope you're doing well. Marcus tells me your business is thriving, and I'm proud of you for that, even though I have no right to be. Love, Dad. Natalie read the letter 3 times, looking for the manipulation, the angle, the hidden request for money or assistance. She couldn't find it. The letter seemed genuine, raw even, in its acknowledgement of wrongdoing. NBUT. She also knew that apologies were easy. Changing behavior was hard, and her father had spent 63 years being the kind of person who would destroy his daughter's equipment to punish her for not funding his schemes. NSHE filed the letter away without responding. A few weeks later, a second letter arrived, this time from her mother. Natalie, I don't know if you'll read this, but I'm writing anyway. I've been living in a 2-bedroom apartment with your Uncle Paul for over a year now, working as a receptionist at a dental office to pay my share of rent. It's been humbling. I used to have a 4-bedroom house and a housekeeper, and now I'm answering phones and making coffee for dentists. I've had a lot of time to think about how I got here, and I keep coming back to that night at my birthday party. Your father dropped your camera in the pond, and I smiled. I remember that smile. I remember feeling satisfied that you were being put in your place. I don't know what kind of person that makes me, but it's not the person I want to be. I'm sorry, Natalie. I'm sorry for smiling when your father destroyed your property. I'm sorry for not standing up for you when you needed me to. I'm sorry for treating your success as something we were entitled to benefit from instead of celebrating it as your accomplishment. I don't expect you to forgive me or want a relationship with me. I just wanted you to know that I understand now what I did wrong. Your mother. This letter was harder to dismiss. There was specificity here, concrete acknowledgement of specific wrongs. Her mother had apologized for the smile, for the complicity, for the fundamental failure of parenting. NBUT Natalie also remembered years of emotional manipulation, of guilt trips and silent treatments, of her mother's masterful use of family obligation as a weapon. One letter didn't erase that history. NSHE discussed both letters with Jessica, who read them with professional skepticism. And they could be genuine, Jessica said. Or they could be a long-game manipulation. Apologize, demonstrate change, wait for you to lower your guard, then ask for money again. That's what I thought. The question is, do you want to find out? Are you willing to risk reopening contact to see if they've actually changed? Natalie thought about this for a long time. No. Maybe that makes me cold or unforgiving, but I'm finally at peace. My business is thriving. I have people in my life who support me. I'm happy. Why would I risk that on the possibility that my parents might have changed? That's a perfectly reasonable position. You're not obligated to give people infinite chances, especially when they've proven repeatedly that they'll hurt you. Natalie drafted a response, short and final. I received your letters. I appreciate that you both acknowledge what you did wrong. However, I'm not interested in rebuilding a relationship. I've moved forward with my life, and I'm happy. I wish you both well, but I need you to respect my boundary and stop attempting to contact me, even through intermediaries. Natalie NSHE sent it through Jessica, maintaining the legal buffer, and felt a sense of closure. She'd given them a response. She'd acknowledged their apologies without accepting them, and she'd made her boundary clear. Summer brought the Seattle Times announcement. Natalie Chen was being featured in their 40 Under 40 special issue, highlighting young professionals making an impact in the region. The article celebrated her business success, her architectural photography, and her advocacy for setting professional boundaries. NTHE feature included a new headshot, Natalie in her studio, surrounded by her work, looking confident and accomplished. She barely recognized herself from the woman who'd watched her cameras sink into a koi pond 20 months earlier. NTHAT woman had been uncertain, still seeking approval, still tied to people who would never value her. This woman knew her worth and protected it fiercely. In September, the international architecture firm extended Natalie's contract for another 2 years with a substantial rate increase. They wanted her to document major projects in Chicago, Miami, and Austin in addition to the West Coast work. You'll need to travel about 40% of the time, the firm's director of marketing explained. We can provide corporate housing in each city, cover all expenses, and pay a premium rate for the travel requirements. You'd essentially become our photographer in residence. NTHE offer was staggering, $850,000 over 2 years. Natalie didn't hesitate. Yes. Absolutely yes. NTHAT night. She sat in her studio alone, looking at the contract she'd just signed and did the math. In the 24 months since her mother's birthday party, her annual income had grown from about $75,000 to over $400,000. She'd gone from working out of her apartment to running a studio with a team. She'd gone from being a good local photographer to being recognized nationally, all because she'd said no to her parents' demands and refused to back down when they tried to punish her. NSHE updated her journal. Sometimes I think about what would have happened if I'd given them the money. If I'd written that $162,000 check and invested in their scam project, their business would have collapsed anyway. Marcus confirmed that the Kirkland development was never viable. I would have lost everything I'd saved. My reputation would have been tied to their fraud. And they would have come back for more. 'Cause people like my parents always come back for more. Saying no saved my career and probably my life. Standing my ground, fighting back, refusing to be intimidated, those choices led me here. To success that's entirely my own. To a life that's entirely my own. I don't regret a single difficult decision I made. 2 years after the birthday party, Natalie stood on the rooftop of a Miami high-rise, photographing the building's architectural details at sunset. The light was perfect, golden and warm, making the glass and steel glow. Her equipment was top of the line. A new Canon R5, Mark II, multiple lenses, lighting gear that would have been unaffordable 3 years ago. NHER phone, buzzed with a text from Marcus. Dad had a heart attack. He's stable but in the hospital. Thought you should know. Natalie lowered her camera, processing this information. Her father was 65, overweight, stressed from prison and its aftermath. A heart attack wasn't surprising, but it still landed with emotional weight. NSHE texted back, "Thanks for telling me. Let me know if anything changes." Are you going to visit him? Natalie thought about this, looking out over the Miami skyline. No. Sending good thoughts, but I'm not breaking my boundary for a health scare. NSHE meant it. 2 years of distance had given her clarity. She genuinely wished her father well. She didn't want him to die or suffer unnecessarily. But she also wasn't going to rush to his bedside and pretend they had a relationship they didn't have. Marcus responded, "I understand. Mom's with him if that makes a difference." It didn't. Natalie went back to her shoot, capturing the building as day turned to night, the city lights creating a new kind of beauty. NTHAT evening, she called Jessica to ask about the implications if her father died. Does a restraining order expire upon death? Yes, but that's not the real question, is it? Jessica's voice was gentle. You're wondering about the emotional aftermath. Whether you'll feel guilty. Will I? Only you can answer that. But Natalie, I've watched you build something extraordinary over the past 2 years. You've set boundaries that protected you, and you've thrived because of those boundaries. If your father passes away, you'll grieve the father you wish you'd had, not the father you actually had. That's normal and healthy. Raymond Chen survived the heart attack and was released from the hospital after 4 days. The scare prompted Marcus to have difficult conversations with their parents about end-of-life planning, about the reality that neither of them had significant assets to leave behind. They're both claiming they want to make amends with you before they die, Marcus reported. I told them that ship has sailed, that you've been clear about your boundaries, but they keep bringing it up. Let them bring it up. I'm not changing my mind. Natalie was in her Seattle studio, reviewing photos from the Miami shoot. Marcus, at some point they're going to die, and I'm going to have to decide whether to attend their funerals. Right now, I honestly don't know if I will. Is that terrible? No, it's honest. Marcus was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I think you made all the right choices. I think you protected yourself the way they never protected you. And I think you've built an incredible life because you were willing to cut off people who were holding you back, even though they were family. In November, Natalie received an invitation to speak at a photography conference in Los Angeles, a panel on building a sustainable creative business. She accepted and found herself in front of 200 photographers talking about her journey. The turning point in my career, she said during the panel, came when I realized that some people will try to exploit your success, and sometimes those people are family. I had to make a choice between maintaining family relationships that were toxic and protecting the business I'd built. I chose my business, and that choice led to everything good in my life right now. During the Q&A, a young photographer asked, "Do you regret cutting off your parents?" Natalie considered this carefully. I regret that they made choices that forced me to cut them off. I regret that they couldn't be the parents I needed. But do I regret the decision itself? No. That decision saved my career, and probably my mental health. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. NTHE response to her answer was overwhelming. Dozens of photographers approached her after the panel, sharing their own stories of family exploitation, boundary-setting struggles, and difficult choices. She exchanged contact information, offered advice, and felt the same sense of purpose she'd felt when the Seattle Magazine article generated reader responses. NHER story mattered. It was helping people. And December marked the 3rd anniversary of her mother's birthday party, the night that changed everything. Natalie spent it in her studio, hosting a holiday party for her team, clients, and friends. The space was transformed with lights, a catered dinner, and warmth. NTOM Morrison raised his glass for a toast. 3 years ago, Natalie borrowed my camera equipment because hers had been destroyed. Today, she runs one of the most successful architectural photography businesses in the Pacific Northwest. That's not luck. That's determination, talent, and the courage to protect what you've built. To Natalie, the room echoed. Later, after most people had left, Lila found Natalie standing by the window, looking out at the Georgetown neighborhood. "You okay?" Lila asked. "Yeah, just thinking about how different my life is now." Natalie smiled. 3 years ago, I was terrified. Terrified of standing up to my parents, terrified of the legal battles, terrified that fighting back would destroy my career. And instead, fighting back saved my career. It saved me. Do you ever wonder what they're doing? How they're managing? Sometimes. Marcus keeps me updated on the basics. They're both working low-level jobs, living modestly, dealing with the consequences of their choices. Part of me feels bad about that. But mostly, I just feel neutral. They made their decisions, I made mine, and we're all living with the results. That's healthy. It took a long time to get here. A lot of therapy, a lot of journaling, a lot of working through guilt and obligation and all those complicated family feelings. Natalie turned away from the window. But I'm here now, and I'm happy. Genuinely actually happy. In January, Natalie was contacted by a publisher interested in her story. They wanted her to write a book about family boundaries, financial exploitation, and building a career despite sabotage. It would be part memoir, part business advice, part self-help, the editor explained. Your story resonates with so many people who are struggling with similar situations. A book could reach thousands of readers who need to hear that it's okay to prioritize their own well-being over family obligation. Natalie negotiated a book deal with a $75,000 advance and 18 months to write. She began the project in March, sitting down with her journals from the past 3 years and reconstructing the journey from exploitation to empowerment. And writing the book forced her to relive painful moments. The camera sinking into the koi pond, her mother's satisfied smile, the family members who'd initially sided against her. But it also let her see how far she'd come, how much she'd grown, how completely she'd transformed her life. NTHE book, titled Shattered Lens: Protecting Your Success from Family Exploitation, was published the following November. It became a regional bestseller, and Natalie found herself doing interviews, podcast appearances, and speaking engagements about family boundaries and professional self-protection. NTHE's success of the book led to more opportunities: a consulting service for creative professionals dealing with family financial pressure, a workshop series on setting boundaries, and eventually, a documentary film about her journey. 5 years after the birthday party, Natalie's business was generating over $600,000 annually. She'd expanded to a larger studio, hired 6 full-time employees, and established partnerships with architecture firms across North America. She'd been featured in national publications, won industry awards, and become a recognized expert on both architectural photography and professional boundary setting. She'd also maintained complete distance from her parents. The restraining order had expired after 2 years, but she'd never needed to renew it. They'd finally stopped trying to contact her. They lived their lives in modest circumstances, working ordinary jobs, dealing with the aftermath of their choices. Natalie heard occasional updates through Marcus. Their father's health continued to decline. Their mother had found some peace working at a nonprofit. They'd apparently stopped talking about Natalie entirely, accepting that the relationship was permanently severed. On the 5th anniversary of that birthday party, Natalie sat in her studio, now a beautiful 3,000-square-foot space with a full team and state-of-the-art equipment, and updated her journal one final time about her parents. 5 years ago, my father destroyed my camera to punish me for refusing to fund his fraudulent business. He thought he could break me, force me into compliance, make me understand that family obligation trumped everything else. Instead, he freed me. That moment of cruelty showed me exactly who my parents were, and exactly what I needed to do. Protect myself, build boundaries, and refuse to let anyone, even family, exploit my success. The past 5 years have been the best of my life, not despite cutting off my parents, but because I cut them off. I'm successful, happy, surrounded by people who actually care about me, and living a life that's entirely my own. I don't forgive my parents for what they did. I don't maintain hope for future reconciliation. But I do thank them in a strange way, for showing me who they really were before I gave them the $162,000 they wanted. Because if I'd given them that money, they would have destroyed me financially and professionally. Instead, I destroyed their scam, protected my career, and built something remarkable. This is what victory looks like: a thriving business, genuine friendships, clear boundaries, and absolute peace with the choices I made. I regret nothing. Natalie closed the journal and looked around her studio, at the walls covered with award-winning photographs, at the equipment that represented her success, at the team working on projects that would further cement her reputation. NHER parents had tried to use her as a resource, and when she refused, they'd tried to destroy her. Instead, she destroyed their scheme, protected herself, and thrived. NTHAT camera sinking into the koi pond had been the best thing that ever happened to her, because it had shown her the truth. And the truth had set her free. Natalie Chen stood in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, surrounded by 48 of her architectural photographs displayed as part of a major exhibition on contemporary architectural photography. The opening night was packed with industry professionals, journalists, and photography enthusiasts. NSHE was 36 years old, internationally recognized, financially secure, and genuinely at peace. Marcus attended with his wife and their 2 young children. Lila was there, as was Tom Morrison. Jessica Moreno had flown out from Seattle. Alex, now her business partner, circulated through the crowd with the ease of someone who'd spent years managing client relationships. "This is incredible, Nat," Marcus said, standing in front of a particularly striking shot of Seattle's skyline at twilight. "You've come so far." "We both have." Natalie squeezed his hand. "Thank you for sticking with me through everything." "Are you kidding? You saved yourself." "I just had the good sense not to get in your way." Later, a journalist from Photography Quarterly approached for an interview. "Ms. Chen, your story about overcoming family sabotage has become almost legendary in creative circles. Do you have any contact with your parents now?" "No. We haven't spoken in 7 years. Do you think you ever will?" Natalie considered this. "I've learned that some relationships are better ended than repaired. My parents showed me who they were, and I believed them. I don't regret the distance. It's what allowed me to build all of this." NSHE gestured to the exhibition around them, but she meant more than just the photographs. She meant her business, her peace of mind, her carefully constructed life built on boundaries and self-respect. "Would you say they were wrong to push you the way they did?" "They were wrong to try to exploit me, but their actions inadvertently freed me from seeking their approval. In a strange way, destroying my camera was the best thing they could have done. It showed me the truth, and the truth set me free." NTHAT night, back in her hotel room, Natalie received an email from an address she didn't recognize. The subject line read, "From your mother." NSHE stared at it for a long moment, her finger hovering over the delete button. 7 years of silence, and now this. NSHE opened it. "Natalie, I saw the article about your MoMA exhibition. I wanted you to know that I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be. I'm not asking for anything. Not forgiveness, not contact, not money. I just wanted you to know that I see what you've accomplished, and it's remarkable. You built all of this despite us, and maybe because of us. I'm sorry for my part in that. I hope you're happy. Mom." Natalie read it twice, then closed her laptop without responding. NSHE was happy. Profoundly, genuinely happy. And she'd learned long ago that some apologies arrive too late, that some bridges are better left burned, and that sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to walk away. She'd walked away 7 years ago, and she'd never looked back, and her life had been extraordinary ever since.